Hello, Eternal Life fans! I am with the founders of TRED Laboratories. TRED Laboratories is trying to create ecosystems in outer space. This is their long-term vision. And that's important because if we want to live forever, we're going to need a place to live. And if people are reproducing, if people are living forever, we might run into issues of overpopulation. So it'd be very great if we had infinite amount of space in outer space, and we're going to need to colonize other planets. So this very much relates to that topic. So I have the founders here. Can you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Chris Jeanette from TRED Laboratories.
And I'm Nick Carlo.
Did I get that right when I was explaining that to the Eternal Life fans? Is that basically the gist of what you guys are doing?
Essentially, yeah. When it comes down to it, we are an organization dedicated to developing the systems and technologies needed to bring our biosphere off this world, and wherever humans are, we need it to come with us in order for it to be a efficient, healthy system, both physiologically and psychologically for its inhabitants.
Awesome. So this is useful if we're going to colonize other planets, because we're going to need to create an atmosphere that's beneficial to humans so we don't die. Right,
and it's more than just creating an atmosphere. We actually have to create new organisms, because as far as technology goes right now, there's no way to simulate gravity. Well, I mean, efficiently simulate gravity in any meaningful way on the planetary surface. So what's going to have to happen, in my view, is we're going to have to set up a stepping stone of sorts where we'll be able to simulate various levels of gravity and the other taxic systems, like the polar alignments, like the magnetic fields, and other gravitational systems, so that we can slowly adapt life in a robust way to where we can actually inhabit other planets.
Yeah, because I've heard that astronauts run into all sorts of health problems because they don't have gravity is essential for health.
Bone decalcification is a huge one.
Yes.
That's what, even with the advanced exercise equipment they have on the ISS, they can mitigate a lot of the damage, but one thing they can't is actually in the pelvic area, because unless you're having gravity with the way that the spine and all your innards are compressing on that, it's really difficult to have that mechanism in place where there's that resistance to keep it built up. And even after several months of returning home from Earth, astronauts still have that problem.
Yeah, so that's definitely, we need to solve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you guys have a solution for gravity issues?
There's a couple of I guess you could say there's a couple of challenges related to having life and having humans with an established outpost out there. Nick alluded to it earlier, as far as having a variable gravity research station. One of the designs that we're actually looking at right now is a series of rings rotating around a center of mass, and because of centripetal force, the way that the rings are tiered or stepped down, you can actually the idea is that you could actually migrate life, or at least try to adapt it from the 1G environment to a lower gravity environment for Mars and the Moon.
Awesome. When did you guys start this? How did you guys get this idea, to start this company?
That's a long story.
Really long story.
That goes back to when we were in the military together, actually.
Oh, wow.
We were stationed in Japan. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. No. I guess. Long story short, Nick and I met at Yokota Air Base. We were both serving out there in the United States Air Force. He was a biomedical technician. I was an avionics technician, and we were always from pretty early on. In fact, from the first day that we met, we started talking about systems theory and the way that new technologies should be, discovered and built to mitigate a lot of the social problems that we see on Earth today. And it ultimately leads to systems such as bioregenerative life support systems, ecology, cybernetics, things of that nature, because through those you actually have you start to build your toolbox for mitigating the big questions, or for dealing with the big questions that we're currently faced with on this planet.
Yeah. And you definitely think this is the solution for overpopulation in the long term. If humans were to have extended lives and we were starting to run into issues with overpopulation, then essentially this can completely solve that. And you guys would be, your company would be essential to solve that problem.
Well, ideally we have to raise the carrying capacity of this planet in order to facilitate the growing population if we do make the necessary strides to elongate human life. I mean, we're going to have to develop the same technology that's going to allow us to build these stepping stone stations that will get us to other planets is going to allow us to live more sustainably on this planet and thus raise the carrying capacity. And so it's the same research that's going to allow us to really successfully live as a species that might not actually have populations managed by death.
Absolutely. And so I understand that the process that you guys have developed, or you're still developing, to create new atmospheres and new organisms and all this stuff, it involves like creating a new terrain and like getting soil and mixing things together to make like a new ecosystems that can support humans. Is this right?
When it comes to Earth's geologic history, and Nick will be able to elaborate in much greater detail when it comes to this. When it comes to Earth's geologic history, what we're trying to do a lot, especially with some of our early experiments, is to mimic the not only the early conditions of Earth, where there's an experiment that we've been talking about where we want to take lunar regolith and Martian regolith simulant, which NASA uses as well as NASA contractors use when they're trying to build these ruggedized systems. You can actually get it. It's based off of volcanic ash that's found only on one place on the planet, as far as I know, through this company called Orbitech. So what we're trying to do is get some of the simulant and perhaps do experiments with blue-green algae as one of them, and do experiments as well with frass without getting into too in depth. And by doing that, we would have the base ingredients for the foundation of an ecosystem. And of course, there's a lot more work that goes on than just that. But what it really comes down to is beginning these experiments and applying a lot of the experiments that have been done. There's a lot of work being done in Asia right now, specifically the Chinese, that a lot of Americans have no idea just how far they are when it comes to bioregenerative life support systems and research of that nature. And that's very important that Americans and the global community is aware of that, because there's a lot of good research that has been done that directly benefits us here at home. Greening deserts is a huge thing that you could use as a I guess an offshoot technology. The discussion, what do you do about when you have a large population, especially when these radical life extension technologies come into play, because they will this century. That's going to be a huge thing we have to deal with. It's a solution. There's other solutions proposed. But what better way than to raise the carrying capacity of this planet, because we have a lot of available space to do so, and in turn use those technologies and vice versa to build up our solar system for human development.
Absolutely. Does your technology, would it have any use to mitigate a lot of the radiation that we're experiencing from like Fukushima? Could you like create like an environment that like sucks that up and stuff? Like, because I know like there's certain mushrooms and stuff that can absorb radiation. So would your company be useful in that regard to like clean up the atmosphere or clean the air or something like that?
Well, I can't really speak to the radioactive problems when you're talking about ambient radiation versus pollution with chemicals that might be radioactive. You're talking about, well, so long story short, yeah, we'll be working to scrub carbon from the atmosphere and nitrogen, in the form of N2, right? But I don't see any way with our current technology that we'll be able to mitigate the radiation problems. But what we are working on is creating environments that can be isolated and have isolated human populations, so that the external radiation is not necessarily an effect on that population.
I see. Because if we were to colonize other planets, there's always the possibility that there's more radiation on different planets. Absolutely. And so that definitely
well, one area of research that we want to look into that's related to radiation is actually radiation resistance. Making both crops, people, and microbes make sure that they can survive in these non-native environments, because the toxic stressors that an organism will be faced with is going to be much different than what we have, I guess, been naturally acclimated to on this planet. So that's when you go into if you have to breeding. If you take a step further, you might have to use transgenic organisms if that doesn't work. But as far as radiation goes, there's actually some interesting research that has recently been done regarding more artificial means, building artificial magnetic shields and whatnot, I know that NASA's been pumping money into that one, because if you can get that shielding, then that's one more barrier where we can safely, I guess, inhabit. But worst case scenario, there's also ways where you design your spacecraft or design your installation where you have your water storage in the walls itself, and basically you design in structurally a lot of the protections that you need. But that's one way that we would deal with radiation. But as far as the issue with Fukushima, that might be a little more down the road, and that's more of we're not really going in that direction at this point.
I see. So I was very fascinated when Nick was describing to me about the rings.
Mm-hmm.
That was so cool. And do you guys have like the design of the rings like sketched out? Do you have sketches about it?
So the idea behind the ring station, remember we were talking about creating a stepping stone to be able to colonize another planet. And the problem is that our biology is not necessarily adapted to be able to handle every single environmental system that's on that planet, such as the magnetic fields, gravity, the solar cycles, what have you. So what we need to do is create an intermediary step between those two where we can simulate all of the major environmental and taxic systems, so that we can modify animal behavior in general and animal biology. And one of the solutions that we're working on right now is the ring station, like you mentioned, starting with a small ring station that's not necessarily inhabited, something like the Bigelow module that currently exists. It's like an inflatable. It's almost shaped kind of like a pill, but with a hole in the center, right? So it's a little balloon. And what we would do is we would spin that to achieve a 1G state and run a simple biological system to start scrubbing CO2 that we could feed to the system, and then have some sort of biomass management system, such as an ant colony that could come in and can scrub that out, and we can actually start to sequester some of that CO2 in the form of biomass. And what we do is as we have enough biomass to move on to a larger ring, we would get a larger ring and stick it next to that. So you have two rings here, and then you'd have another ring slightly inside that's slightly larger. So you'd have to slow down the station, right, to get this to now be the 1G, and this would be slightly less than 1G. And so we would start terraforming inside of this ring. It's called para-terraforming instead of mass terraforming, like what we would do if we had a mind to make Mars an Earth-like planet.
Yeah.
Right. So we would para-terraform that ring, and then we would make another larger ring and move and sort of slop over into the next one and create basically highly productive ecosystems that can scrub more and more CO2 that we can feed it, CO2 and nitrogen and all the other building blocks of life. And we can step up and step up and step up until they would meet in the middle and create a kind of sphere, right, where we can eventually scrunch them together, seal them in some way, and then pipe light in as we have been doing for the rings, because you'd have the planets around the outside where the gravity is at, right? And then we would eventually move from the 1G ring, which is now the center ring, and move inside of. So we would start terraforming on what was originally the inside of the rings. So you'd have this larger area inside, and that's more of an orbital version of what we call a BHAB. Would you call it a bioregenerative habitation engine?
Yeah, a bioregenerative habitation engine, a BHAB, which is also really interesting, and we can actually show you this as well. We have some really nice renders done of that.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and with this structure, you're actually producing a heat exchange effect. So on one end, you would have. On one end at the base, you'd have basically a solar collector that's taking the water that you find on site, just in the form of, even if it's a brine solution, it'd actually retain heat really well, and then you could actually desalinize it and pull out the water vapor that you need. But that's not even the most exciting part of this structure. You would have a heat exchanger at the top where it's exposed to the ambient atmosphere outside the structure, allowing that rising water vapor I was talking about from the base that's heated up by the sun. It would actually freeze there, and you'd have this giant ice block at the end. It's really interesting. I guess.
So you're talking about the Gununga Gap, right?
Yeah, the Gununga Gap. This is these bioregenerative habitation engines, and what you do is through this heat exchanger in the middle where you actually have the habitation. If designed properly, you could have a jungle environment that is producing carbon negative that is producing a carbon negative bioregenerative output, where you're actually taking carbon, sequestering it permanently into your biomass, and then you could use it for whatever use you have. In our case, in the human case, it'd be food essentially, and waste processing as the two major things, because through that you can get everything you need to eat, all your water and everything you need to breathe, while the structure itself is designed to support that simply by its form. And that's what we're currently studying, and it's really exciting what can be done with that, because there's for the last 40 years, the way that people have been proposing these Mars bases is you have a spaceship. Literally, the way I see it, you have a spaceship parked on the surface. You're in this contained Earth-like environment in a metal shell sitting on the Martian regolith, or on the lunar regolith. And what we would like to do is actually use the materials on site. So if you're inside this thing, you can walk around on the Martian surface barefoot, while the surface itself is being inoculated with, Earth biology. So the process of soil building starts. And a lot of that involves having, your livestock in the form of your animals and insects, plants in the form of your blue-green algae, and, standard crops and whatnot. You extrapolate that out, and you have these integrated ecosystems, these integrated biospheres. And you can do a lot of things that people don't, I guess at this point in time, don't think they can. I don't think people truly, I think there's very few of us who can truly appreciate the quality of life that people can have in these off-world structures, be it in, these floating variable gravity habitats, or on Mars. People think that they're going to have to live very Spartan in a very artificial environment, and we're trying to do the exact opposite. We're trying to have these people live in such a way that their biology is accustomed to it already. Because as an animal, the anatomically modern human, we grew up in the savannas and the jungles of the African continent. That's ideally, I think, where if humanity could, in a fully biological sense, return to. And in my personal field, this whole exploration with technologies, this is way the animal that was sleeping under the stars, afraid of the dark, can sleep under the stars again and not be afraid of it. And I think that when all things come full circle, we will have that. In order to provide this quality of life, we have to really provide a systems approach to our ecological design. And in our case, it comes in the form of these off-world habitats, because what better way to bring the best, as far as the scientifically minded ethos, together with the ecologically minded, the ecologically minded, heart that's at a lot of that's in our core, but also core of a lot of like-minded scientists and researchers, making sure that's what's actually out there, along with, because there's already going to be a profit incentive in the form of asteroid mining. If we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing it right for human culture. It has to be more than that. It has to be more than acquisition of resources.
Wow, you guys are like masterminds. You guys are like very creative to think about all this stuff. It's very cool. And didn't you guys say that the name of this this ring system you have is called the Life Star? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I
think that's so cool.
We didn't get a chance to discuss that further. But the BHAB is sort of like the Gununga Gap system that he was describing, where you have the heated area and the icy area that causes an artificial water cycle based on a heat exchanger and a passive solar heater, right? Mm-hmm. The idea is to create a hyper vegetative ecosystem that will create excess biomass that we can then slop over and then increase the production of more of these systems. And the same goes for the system we were talking about, called affectionately called the Life Star, because the idea is that you would bring this biomass generation engine, right, that mm-hmm. we've created by this point, and have excess biomass to then inoculate a further paraterraforming operations in other satellites and on the surface.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question. How does artificial intelligence play into all this? Because robots, I think robots could be very useful in terraforming and going to other mm-hmm. planets, because while we're developing the structures on these planets and the whole systems, that you might need a robot to go out there and build the starting foundation, because you mm-hmm. guys are trying to create organisms that can survive in the atmosphere, mm-hmm. but robots already can.
They definitely can. And NASA, I was going to mention the NASA's Valkyrie robot. It's this humanoid robot that it's amazing how fast some of these new designs are coming out, especially with the DARPA challenge for the DARPA robotics challenges that they've had, and telerobotics for construction on the moon is definitely probably what we will see, simply because the time it takes to control something from Earth is about a second each way, and that's within our ability to control it from a nice air conditioned space on Earth, kind of like how we do for kind of like how we, meaning our technological society, is doing with drone operations. Doing that, but in a way where we're actually controlling robots to construct things, and that's something that NASA's definitely look at. That's something that we've done some studies in as well. It's going to happen that way. As far as Mars, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you have that time delay of upwards of 20-40 minutes round trip. So one way to mitigate that is either have them be fully autonomous, so they are constructing these things, so when the human crews arrive, somebody's already there waiting for them, or put a human station on Phobos or Deimos, or in Martian orbit somewhere, and control it there before the people go. That's another option.
So your company is probably most likely going to work with other companies, robotics companies, and other technology companies as a collaborative effort to make this thing happen.
Ideally.
The way that I see it, artificial intelligence and robots are going to take a secondary role to the human and biological influence. And mainly for the reason that if we send artificial intelligence and robots to Mars to start fixing the atmosphere, building machines, what's the point? They don't need the atmosphere, they don't need the plants. Until we can actually change our biology to inhabit it, it's a moot point. I mean, we can start in the eventual hope that we'll have biology that can inhabit that land, but the fact of the matter is that long-term inhabitants of Mars is not possible at this current state in our biology. And so a lot of it I actually see being the work being done in large part biology and humans in a less highly automated and a less highly technical manner. It would be more akin to farming than it would to an automated manufacturing process.
Oh yeah, totally. As far as when the food process, when you actually have these structures completed and you have the people living in it, it's going to be a completely human-centered operation. You won't need robots on the inside. When these structures are complete, it will be it's designed optimally to be tended completely by humans. But again, as far as actually doing the initial setup, doing the initial, just like how NASA's sending out probes now to scout the environment before you send a human there. You only want robots when the element of risk is too high, but ultimately it's a human project completely. Absolutely.
So do you guys have any estimations and projections of how far in the future this is going to actually take place? Like, what's the first step to making this happen? What's the first step to start colonizing other planets?
The first step would be educating ourselves on how to live sustainably here.
Mm-hmm.
Until we can have sustainable human culture on this planet, we have absolutely no hope of managing a sustainable civilization in an even more hostile environment where sustainability is necessary not only for healthy survival, but survival even at its simplest form. So I would say the first steps are to figure out our societal and our agricultural and our economic systems that we will take with us, then importing that into archaeologies here and into desert research stations and Arctic research stations and seasteads, and then we can take that culture and that technology that develops there and put it into a simulated Terran-like ecology that would be inside of a space station, which then we can engage in long-term husbandry projects and genetic modification projects if necessary to be able to transform that life slowly, step by step, to a manner where we have an evolving culture and an evolving biology that can be transported to the surface of another planet, or can be involved in rotating crews for mining of planets and asteroids, providing a home for us away from home so that we can facilitate civil and industrial expansion of the human species, or the post-human species, whatever that looks like.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. Yeah, so first step is going green here, right? We got to get it right on this planet.
Absolutely.
And bring these systems to other planets.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that when you begin to understand, I guess, systems theory and ecology and how our entire planet maintains itself and how it changes over time due to the various inputs and outputs from solar flux and whatnot, you begin to realize that a lot of these solutions, a lot of these technical solutions, almost take on a biological form in this sense right here, in a sense that what we construct ultimately ends up looking and functioning very similar to the natural processes, until eventually there comes a point where the two might be virtually indistinguishable from each other, because what we are ultimately trying to do is support life, offshore the biosphere, green the cosmos. And in the end, that's good for all Earth life, which is why we talk about, instead of a post-humanity, post-Terran biosphere as a one way to look at it, because when we take our biosphere elsewhere, it's going to take on and it's going to adapt to its specific environment. So you might have this explosive speciation and divergence of life in all its forms. Interestingly, speaking of artificial intelligence, that might have its place. What I do not know, I don't think anybody really does up to a point. Once machines start, not only being at parity with human intelligence, but to then take it a step beyond, then it really might be their show from then on out, and then we're the ones figuring out how to best respond. But either way, at the end of the day, preserving Earth life and then watching it and how it'll flourish and how it'll change, is going to be really interesting, especially if we get those radical life extension technologies, because then in many ways people have argued that they won't have as much purpose, when in reality I think there will be more purpose, because then we can green the cosmos, then we can do things and create things beyond what we can currently imagine, and that's amazing, and we're excited to be a part of that.
Awesome. So, overpopulation. I'd just like your guys' opinion on if you think overpopulation is a real issue, because a lot of people think it's exaggerated, and what do you guys think about overpopulation?
Look at the ecosystem. I mean, the oceans are dying.
Because of overpopulation?
I mean, as we currently live, we're overpopulated. Because right now, I'm not just a human sitting in this room, eating the fruits around me and processing my waste in the soil where I'm at. Myself extends on into factories and systems, and I mean, we've driven on the highway an hour today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this glass bottle took more caloric energy to create and release more CO2 into the atmosphere probably than I would breathe out in a year. So, and I consume this in a matter of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So this isn't the human organism. The human organism is this massive machine now.
You're right.
And we can't have as many massive machines, especially as the developing world starts to crave the technological advancements and the comforts that we see in the Western world. We're going to see a increase in overpopulation that's exponential, not because of an increase in population, but in a decrease in carrying capacity because of an increased need for carrying capacity of the individual.
Mm-hmm. Especially, it's not sustainable if we're getting our energy from nuclear power, when we could be getting it from things like thorium energy. Have you guys heard of thorium?
Thorium's wonderful, or helium-3 for that matter.
Helium-30, I've never heard of that.
Helium-3? Oh, this actually is a great segue, because as it turns out, it's just from the simple fact that the solar wind is hitting the moon. It's literally collecting on the surface, and it is a great. If we can get the whole fusion issue worked out, it will literally provide thousands of years of energy cleanly for planet Earth, and it's readily accessible at the moon where it's just been collecting. Besides that, there's one company, I believe they're called Shackleton Energy, who have done some research and studies into that, as well as mining water and such. They want to go to the moon's south pole and do that. It's really going back though. It's really fascinating when Nick was bringing up just how our energy pull is extended around us. Because when he said that, I was just thinking back about how I pay Google for extra storage space in my Google Drive. I maintain social media profiles. They are sitting on servers right now. Even if I'm here not using them, the simple fact that I have a virtual presence, and that we all have virtual presences online, that's burning energy as we speak. That is pulling energy from the grid just to maintain the servers where our data is being stored. And the same applies for everybody. So it's absolutely, as far as carrying capacity goes, and as far as overpopulation, we are, at our current form, we are completely overpopulated. However, it's purely a matter of, at least in my opinion, and I'm sure Nick would feel very similar, if not the same, it's simply a matter of how these resources are allocated and pulled, allocated, and distributed. What we do with the resources that are readily available. We have more than enough energy to provide for the whole of human civilization, hitting the planet every second in just solar power. There is a new form of geothermal energy that they discovered in Iceland. I was just reading about and watching last night, where they want to tap the energy of a volcano. The energy is there to support us safely. It's just a matter of adopting new methods in order to make it happen. Our modern system, in my opinion, is akin to us trying to drive a 1970s Buick. While change is coming, we're trying to figure out how to change the tires and do an engine change while it's barreling 70 miles an hour down the freeway, and everybody's inside of it and we can't get out. It's
good analogy.
It's not that simple, to just change the system overnight. But by implementing and by integrating a new systems approach tailored to the needs of a population, we can begin to address that. And I think that going back to what the work that you're doing in life extension, I think it's critically important, because once people realize that they cannot pawn this world off to somebody else and they're living in it and the consequences of their actions are permanent to their well-being, I think that's going to change a lot. Or if not that, then at least adopt the 7 generations concept. And that's what the Native Americans did, where they would always try to imagine and conduct themselves in a way where they would imagine how it would affect the people 7 generations beyond them. So if not life extension, then what? Then adopting, more, I don't even want to call them old ways, because these ways aren't that old if they're self-evident. We just forgot them. We forgot that there's ways to live sustainably and with a high quality of life. Maybe it's just a matter of rediscovering. I don't want to call it ignorance, because we're all on a process of discovering these things as we go along. But it's definitely something that needs to happen sooner than later, or else we're going to wake up in a world that is no longer biocompatible with us. And that's very dangerous and scary.
Yeah. You touched on an interesting point, is that if people are living longer lives, they're going to have more vested interest in making this world a good place to live, right? Because if you think
Totally.
you're just living like 80 years and then you're done, then from a selfish standpoint, you could just say, well, I don't care if I pollute this planet, I'm going to be gone. But if you want to live forever, and you're trying to live forever, then you have a vested interest, a selfish interest, to want to make this planet a better place.
Well, I've heard people say that I don't have to worry about it, because somebody else is going to live in this world.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard people say that, and I'm sure a lot of us and a lot of your listeners and viewers have. And it's a really toxic perspective. It's really, it's unsustainable, and it poses an existential threat.
Absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about the colonization of other planets. I have a few questions. Which is the first planet we'll be colonizing, you think? I think it's Mars, right? And what are some of the other planets that right now science is saying, okay, these are the next planets we'll do? What are the most likely planets that we'll be colonizing in order, like Mars and then other ones? What do you think?
I would say that the science isn't out really to make a judgment call on that. I would say my gut feeling is Mars is closer, and it's more similar. So I imagine Mars, but I mean it all depends on how long it takes biology to catch up and adjust itself to be able to live on Mars. So we could have established civilization off-world for who knows how long before we have the capacity to colonize a world that we know of currently. Now there's other Earth, like if we find another Earth-like planet that we can feasibly reach, that is by its very nature capable of sustaining human life, or sustaining human life with minimal assistance, I think we'd probably colonize that long before we colonize Mars. If we find it in the next, well, I couldn't really give you an accurate number of years, but if we find it.
Absolutely.
Since I'm not the scientist of this team, I'm the developer, I'll go and take a shot way out there, and I'll do so with a smile on my face. Venus. Why Venus?
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about Venus for a second, because I read this paper by a guy named Gregory Landis, and it really kind of changed my perspective on some things, and at the very least provided a very entertaining and informative view about what is technically possible, and I use the word technically underlined and italicized and bolded. As it turns out, our breathable atmosphere, our breathable oxygen-nitrogen mixture, is a lifting gas in CO2. And as it so happens, 1 bar of pressure is right at the layer of Venus, where you have essentially a temperature similar to that of Earth, between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 120 degrees Fahrenheit at the cloud tops. Okay, yes, there's a fine mist of sulfuric acid, but the amount of the albedo reflecting off the cloud tops below you is something like 0.75, and I think aluminum's like 0.90. I'd have to actually get the numbers out on that, but it's in that neighborhood where even the reflection of the clouds, you can have your solar panels facing downward and upward and get a whole lot of energy. Not only that, but that's a lot of energy for chlorophyll. And if you could find a way to protect your bioplastics that you've made from the cellulose or the plants that you grow inside these bags, you could make more of these until eventually the idea is eventually to be able to start making more of these things on just using the resources available. Maybe have a hook getting the Venus regolith and then combining it. Again, this is like 100 years from now.
It's kind of like organic 3D printing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the cool thing is if you can get that layer, you can literally have a floating layer above Venus, and then below it is completely dark. And then what you would get is all the carbon dioxide would begin to rain out of the atmosphere. And over the course of maybe 300 to 500 years, you can have yourself a planet which may be useful to some forms of Earth life. But you wouldn't really need to go down to the surface if you just imagine that you're floating at that cloud layer, kind of like Empire Strikes Back in Star Wars, which is, yes, it's out there, and but it's a fascinating thing, especially when you start getting to what's possible with nanotechnology. So if you wanted a far out shot, there you go. More realistically, probably Ceres, because it has access to the asteroid belt. It's water rich. As it turns out, we're going to be visiting it, or one of our probes is going to be visiting it in the relatively near future. Even though the gravity is very low there, it's large enough that it forms a sphere. And from there, you can actually do your operations into the asteroid belt, which has more resources and real estate than humanity will ever know what to do with, which is really exciting. So Mars, Ceres, and then if I'm lucky, Venus.
Fascinating. Speaking of 3D printing, I was thinking that 3D printing itself might be very useful in the construction of these rings, because how are you going to get all that material up there in construct metal? The ring's going to be composed of metal, or how are the rings going to be actually made, and might the parts of the rings be created with 3D printers?
There's a mineral on the moon related to bauxite and Earth where you can get your aluminum, and it's in a lower gravity well, so it'd be easier. But if you want to take that,
well, right now the Bigelow modules, from what I understand, are a composite of different textiles actually, and it's more of a cloth-like material that's constrained by cables, right? So that it'll hold its shape, and you inflate them like balloons, so they're compactable, and then we can inflate them in low Earth orbit, right? Inoculate them with whatever materials we need to start the base pair of terraforming operations, and we can go from there. Aside from that, I don't necessarily have answers for you for the construction of them. We're mainly focused on the biology inside, but I mean we're in the market for astrophysicists and engineers that want to join our team and help us solve these problems.
It's going to be a big collaborative effort.
Absolutely, this is bigger than one person, one organization, one nation, or I mean one planet really. So it's going to be a long time. It's going to be collaborative across peoples.
So let's change subjects a little bit. Let's get more talking into eternal life, living forever, and your guys' personal ideas about living forever.
That's gonna be fun.
And you guys personally, so as you know, I'm obsessed with living forever. I'm the eternal life fan. So are you guys eternal life fans? Do you want to live forever? And if so, why? Why do you want to live forever?
You want to go first, man?
Sure. Well, I'm gonna have to preface this with the definition of life. I mean, I pretty much already see, so long as the biological evolutionary process continues, we live forever. However, why not live forever as an individual, or even a consciousness, or maybe we don't necessarily know what that consciousness is, whether it's a state of matter or whether it's a complex series of patterns. I mean, these questions are still out. So I guess if my consciousness is a complex series of patterns and they come up with if Randall Cohen's work is successful and the substrate independent mind is possible. I'm not so sure how I feel about completely abandoning biology, whether that's a good idea or not for me. Something that I favor. I'm not
like
so sure.
uploading into the machine.
Yeah, uploading into the
computer.
machine.
Yeah,
Maybe a massive simulation. But I think one thing that provides is the ability to have a distributed consciousness, right? So say we have one of these systems, one of these life stars, if you will. Why not have a distributed consciousness through that ecosystem? By the time we have substrate independent mind, I'm sure we'll have nanotechnology capable of complex information transfer, and so why couldn't we have a distributed consciousness throughout an ecosystem that exists sort of like a regulator or a gardener, if you will, to grow this and guide that evolution in a sort of way where you could take on the form of the consciousness of an ecosystem.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, if on the other hand, it's not, and it exists actually in the matter, and our biological self is the self through and through, if the consciousness is locked up in the actual matter of the self, and I had to continue as my individual self, I would say same thing, except for I would just be one small participant in that ecosystem, and I could see myself living out my days as this is what I plan on doing now. I mean, trying to help guide the evolution of the entire Terran biome, rather than just myself as this quote-unquote biological being here. Where, I mean, as anybody with an understanding of systems biology would know, is not necessarily the case. We're an extended biome that extends beyond what we can sense. And I mean, extend beyond what we can sense or measure. I mean, so I want to see the continuation of that evolution, and I don't see any reason why, in my current form, I wouldn't want to live forever to continue that. If I die, my molecules will be transferred and be consumed by whatever ecosystem I'm in, and that consciousness, those molecules might be distributed through, and my consciousness might be everywhere. But if we could live forever, why not? I don't know if I would change anything.
There's a really good analogy to
Could
this
be,
that
absolutely.
I was just thinking. Speaking of the nature of consciousness, going into possibly the forms it would take in the future. There was this thought experiment done where you'd imagine that everybody in the nation of China is holding up a flag or two flags, maybe a red flag and a black flag, and depending on what pattern of flags you see coming at you determines what flag that you would put up. A lot of this is kind of based off if you've ever read Stephen Wolfram's A New Kind of Science, where you have these self-generating algorithms these algorithms that produce that self-generate patterns in them. It could be very well possible that through the raising and lowering of flags in that complex system, a form of consciousness may arise as it's hypothesized. There's some really interesting things about it. There's also this paper recently published, I believe, this month, by a student or researcher at MIT about how consciousness itself could exist as a form of matter, and he outlines pretty well his argument about why it can. Now, as far as becoming ecosystems, which is a really fascinating idea, I like to go there, and then I'll kind of go into another way we can take it. But when it comes to becoming an ecosystem, thinking back to the Gaia hypothesis, if you have a highly technical or highly advanced intelligence, be it originally biological or artificial, that becomes the environment. Essentially, I could imagine it could become so complex that it doesn't only regulate the environment, but subjectively becomes it. And why not take that a step further? If these things are spreading, around, basically greening dead planets, then it could be that the planet itself forms, in a sense, it becomes its own form of consciousness. Similar to the Gaia hypothesis, only human in origin, because we would be the ones inoculating it both with biology and intelligence. Going back, I guess, to what my view, or what I would like, my desire, because I'm an advocate of radical life extension, eternal life. I would like to first get that technology and really promote it, because then I'll be able to figure it out from there. Because there's so many things that one can do when they're given all the time in the universe. I'd like to get that time, and then
Yeah, like oftentimes I think like there's really only two options: you're alive forever or you're dead forever. I mean, does the idea of being dead forever and not being able to experience life, does that bother you guys?
Actually, recently I can't remember who I was listening to, but they rose an interesting point. They said, try to go back. I can't remember who it was, but they said go back and try to remember being born. Try to imagine waking up from never being asleep, right?
Yeah.
And then try to imagine going to sleep but never waking up. And every single consciousness that has ever come into being does that. If our consciousness is this unique order of these molecules that have somehow fallen into a system that creates this consciousness, this awareness of the ego self, the operations of biology, it
Oh yeah, I was waiting on the edge of my seat for that.
Like it's the same thing with genetic modification. I mean, how do you calculate infinite probability?
Give me a universe full of infinite novelty. Let me try to finish up with that, and then work on the final novelty after the infinite novelty, which I don't think could ever be possible. But I guess the last novelty, let that be the eternal sleep. But that's after all a universe full of possibilities have at least been explored or considered, and that's the ideal situation.
Yeah. Eternal life. I don't think, personally, I don't feel like there's anything more important than living forever. And I guess it's just because being alive, I became addicted to being alive. I want to stay alive forever because I sort of feel like life is meaningless if we die from a selfish standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
From like if there's no afterlife, which none of us know if there's an afterlife or not. But from a selfish standpoint, if your existence stops, it kind of feels like my life is meaningless. I have to keep on existing forever. You know what I mean?
Especially when we begin to discover just how much knowledge there's yet to be discovered. And we were just discussing this just last night, looking through looking up publications, because we're in the middle of we're literally pouring through a library worth of information, so we're constantly looking for more, and just realizing how many experiments have not yet been done that need to be done in order to really preserve humanity existentially. Just to see the world just to see entire worlds yet undiscovered on our own planet, the oceans, for example, or simply a sphere of knowledge or a sphere of science that we've only begun to crack, not because we can't or it's too difficult, just because we don't have enough people, or the people don't have enough time to start getting into or get into further. There's so much we have yet to do that I really don't see why this 70-year, I guess, expiration date that's somehow placed on us, at birth, should be sufficient if the world is highly complex and doesn't care about time frames. Time is a human construct, so why not? If it's a human construct, why not get more?
Yeah, think about how much faster the human race could evolve if when someone dies, that's a wealth of knowledge and experience and information that's just destroyed. Think about how much faster the world could evolve if you didn't have to, quit with each generation. Like imagine a 500-year-old and a 1,000-year-old, how much knowledge they would have and how amazing they could be to help everything.
And to play devil's advocate, I remember this point was raised at the Transhuman Visions Festival, is if no one dies, what if people after a certain point are rigid and stuck in their ways? What if they stop changing? What if instead of having a 1,000-year-old all-wise individual, you have a guy that's been the same way for 940 years and hasn't changed a single thing and continues to exist the same way he did, or she did, or it did, or... Which
is why you send him to space.
Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, actually, there's
that was a good. You actually said that earlier.
There's an interesting book. I think it's written by, and excuse me if he's out there and I get the name wrong, John Scalise. I think that his name's right. But anyway, the book is called Old Man's War, and in it, they outline how with the discovery of both space colonization, these radical life extending technologies, Earth is pretty much the same place. It's just all happening outside of Earth. So when you're, pretty much, 75 years old and you're getting into the geriatric phase of your life, you get, and this is paraphrasing, I read the book a couple of years ago, you basically get a letter or get a notice saying that you have the opportunity to get on a space elevator in Africa, go to the space station, and then they give you a new body, and you're going to be completely young. The only catch is that you're a warrior and you have to fight aliens, and most of you die. But I think that, because I think that, we as a society get a lot of our, philosophical inputs from, from both fantasy and reality, history and whatnot. Going back to fictions, I think Robert Heinlein, said that something granted inherently has no value, or something along those lines, paraphrasing it. So when it comes to things such as radical life extension, eternal life, if we really are concerned about some of the adverse social ramifications on this planet, then it really provides us an opportunity to expand elsewhere and kind of leave Earth to be a more of a fresh breeder, a breeding ground for new ideas, a breeding ground, and then after a certain phase, maybe like after 50 years old, then you can have the option, you can be given the option that if you want to continue, here you go. Only catch is perhaps, and this is just speculation, you might have to either exchange your ability to procreate, or you can get a ticket to space and then help populate the cosmos and bring our biosphere elsewhere. I think those are two ways to have the two work together without overtaxing the system, and overtaxing the planet, kind of what we were talking about earlier. But yeah, going back to that, if people are going to be if people are going to hold society back, send them to space, because then they can, if they have this idea about how they want to, I guess, have their own world, even if the world's changing around them, have their own political ideology implemented, and basically have a sandbox to try new social and political experiments, or even, I guess, hold on to the old ones. Let's turn this around. Perhaps maybe there's some cultures that are dying right now. Maybe the West is gobbling up, too much, and this planet's becoming homogenous. So one possible way to preserve a lot of the more traditional societies is to maybe give them the tools they need so they can have a world all to themselves to continue that specific aspect of this grand experiment that is, life on Earth, where they can continue to, I guess, take whatever seeds of culture that that germinated on this planet, specific ones, all the plants will look different. So you take one and you just spread them across the cosmos. Different national identities, ideas, political ideologies, economic systems, even new forms of life itself. And we could do that out there without it, I guess, threatening our planet, our home, because we won't be maybe introducing ideas or things which could metastasize and harm the system or harm us, or just go in the wrong direction.
I'm super excited about the future. Let's talk a little bit about the future. That's one of the reasons I want to live forever. I want to be alive to see the future and all the technology, and maybe we're going to discover aliens, and I'm excited about it. So what gets you guys excited about the future?
A lot of things.
What's the thing that gets you most excited? What do you most want to see in the future?
That's a big question.
It's huge.
You want to hit that one first?
What do I want to see in the future?
There's a lot.
For me, I would say hyper realistic virtual reality. I could plug into a machine like the Matrix and this. Oh, so cool. That would be awesome.
I'm not so excited about the possibility for extreme digital technological advancement, so much as I am excited for the extremes of biological advancement. Like seeing what I might be able to do with my own biology. I'm most excited. One of the things that really gets me excited right now is being able to see ultraviolet or near infrared. Right now, Science for the Masses just finished a crowdfunding campaign, I believe, on Mycelium, which is now experiments.com? I can't remember. Anyways, they're developing a laser eye surgery that will allow biological vision into the near infrared.
Wow.
I want to be able to see the universe as it is. I mean, I want to be able to see or sense a greater spectrum of the electromagnetic field. I want to be able to possibly modify my biology in completely biological ways. Maybe, I don't know, make myself shorter, less apt to bump into doorways. Who knows? I don't know. But
I think Nick was telling me
I
that
have a
day.
vendetta against doorways.
Nick was telling me that he about some ideas, radical ideas for I guess how you would live within an environment given these radical ones, and actually becoming a little monkey with really long arms would perhaps be ideal for a lot of these places. A little 2 foot tall monkey, very long arms.
Just a little guy, kind of like a bonobo or one of those smaller
toddler
apes.
size. I use toddler size because I have a 4-year-old or 3-year-old.
Little party animal hanging out in the space station.
Pretty much.
Continuing and facilitating evolutionary biology.
Or you can just be a floating sphere like a Wheatley in Portal.
Could be.
I think that could also work, especially for zero gravity environments. Just have like a little tractor beam attached to it.
Yeah.
The future.
I guess when it comes to a lot of these future technologies, it's really just seeing where we are today and how it extrapolates out. All because there's this really interesting something that I found interesting is the idea of the black swan effect. These unforeseen I guess historical impacts which completely and radically change whatever predetermined idea we thought was going to happen. Many early concepts of the 20th century looked a certain way because nobody foresaw the advent of mechanized warfare. What World War I brought to the table, let alone what World War II brought to the table. And that's just last century alone. There's a I guess well that's more of a negative spin on it, but yeah, just seeing things and understanding where it can go. Another idea of I guess the black swan would be, for example, well, we see it coming, but nobody knows exactly what will initiate this singularity, who it will be, and what they will create. We know generally nebulous terms, okay, it's going to probably be a well-funded organization creating some sort of artificial intelligence in either the financial sector, which I think could come first. What I fear is that the first Turing, Turing capable hyper-intelligent machine would come from Wall Street, and that is that terrifies me to no end. But it could very well be that these same computers, tweaked a little differently, would be able to free humanity economically. Might be able to discover a new algorithm that allows, say, the usherance of post-scarcity, which I think needs to happen. Whether or not it's going to happen is irrelevant, because you can keep a artificial system such as our own alive forever on life support if you really wanted to. But the idea that we could mitigate scarcity, I think, is probably the most exciting thing for me. Being able to have people live without the wants that are currently plaguing us. This idea of artificial scarcity created neuroses. I'll give you an example of what that is. A kid growing up in poverty is more likely to be in an abusive household, more likely to be exposed to drug use, alcohol use. These things, coupled with the fact that they see others having more psychologically healthy lives, that inequality produces neurotic behavior, which ends up, I guess, acting out in the form of thefts, acts of violence, simply because there's a scarce environment where
hoarding.
Yeah, it's just because the way that we are brought into this world directly impacts us, directly impacts our brain patterns and how we go about living in this world. So many positive things, many detrimental things, which many times we can't even foresee for ourselves, let alone for others. But these things can be mitigated with better use of technology, better use of the resources we have on this planet. Going back to overpopulation, yes, in this current form we may be overpopulated, but by no means is the planet by its inherently an overpopulated planet. We just are terrible at designing the systems to feed us, clothe us, and to give us a quality of life that we feel we ought to have. We can do all these things with the proper application of technology, and that's what really gets exciting for me.
I'm looking forward to the future. Awesome. So I'm going to give you guys one opportunity just to say if there's anything in particular you think is important now for the Eternal Life fans to hear about your company, or anything, just one last thing you can say about it, and then I'll ask you just a few more questions.
Okay.
Is there anything else? Is there anything in particular a message I haven't covered, a question I didn't ask you that you would want for me to ask you, or anything like that?
It's pretty comprehensive. I would just like to extend it, saying that if we do have these radically extended lives and we do have this amazing future ahead of us, why not consider maybe a couple of you, if you're a fan of the eternal life, if you're a fan of eternal life and you're a fan of this direction, consider what you want to do with your time. Would you like to green a planet? Would you like to perhaps, get involved in some sort of settlement or a colony effort? We really we really are looking forward to, building a community of like-minded people, but more importantly, not just making it so it's like, oh, everybody, can do this, but don't do it. No, we're looking to, it has to be a collaborative effort. Those of us, we call it the tribe. People who see things not as they are, but what they could be, this adjacent to possible. We're looking for others who share that. We're doing that right now.
Yeah, I always tell people,
expand the circle.
Find the reason you want to live. Find the reason you want to be here and exist forever, because if you're going to live forever, you have to have a reason why you want to live forever. So yeah, it's great that you guys have found your passion. So I'm just going to conclude the interview. I always like to conclude the interview with asking a very deep question. So let's be, what is your most important goal? And I'll start first by answering that question. So my most important, and why? My most important goal is living forever. Because I love being alive and I don't want it to ever end. So what's your most important goal? Oh, and my second most important goal. You could say your second most. My second most important goal is to help other people live forever. Because I would be a jerk not to. If it's so important to me, I want it to be important to other people. So what's your...
Well, who wants to be the only Highlander left anyway?
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
No, I guess if I'm going first, I would say most important goal: offshore the biosphere and green the cosmos, because this sun's going to eventually become a red giant. So if we really want to secure life, our biology, in one shape or another, we're going to need to move out there. We're going to need to move out to space. We're going to need to leave the solar system eventually. If securing life is the number one priority, as it should be for living creatures, because all sentient beings want to maximize their potential, the two go hand in hand. And offshore the biosphere, green the cosmos. I don't have a second one.
Awesome.
Sorry.
It's great.
Mine is pretty similar to his, but it has two steps. The first step would be being able to recognize myself in the extended biology and the evolutionary process at my core, rather than having to think about it. Just being able to see every living being and the extended microbiology that is necessary for its life as one being and as myself. And the second would be facilitating the continuation of that process, and that means leaving this planet, because this planet will one day be destroyed by something. And if we want to continue the evolutionary process, which to me is the only evolutionary imperative that we have, is to continue the process, because at a base molecular level there's no right and wrong, there's no good and bad, there's only our human aspirations, which are one tiny little speck of that. And so I don't know what's right, and I don't pretend to feel like I have control over the direction of the evolutionary process on a grand scale. The only thing I want to see is the continuation of that drama, and to see that continue so that we don't get wiped out by the next asteroid that comes along.
Yeah.
So that we can continue this process and see what happens, so that eventually our consciousness can leave the flicker that is human awareness and become a perpetual awareness that is extended throughout the universe and cosmos.
Wow. Beautifully spoken. So, you hit on a very important point, is that an asteroid could come and destroy the entire world. And that's very bad news for Eternal Life fans.
It's very bad news.
So that's why the work you guys are doing is extremely important for everyone, especially people that want to live forever.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow. Okay, and I always tell the Eternal Life fans to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Definitely.
Worst case scenario is we're all gonna die from an asteroid.
That's one of them.
So we need to do what you guys are doing. This is awesome.
Or even on a simpler thing, just just know how much resources you're pulling out of this world. The quantified self movement, I think, is awesome. I really like what they're doing. We just need to take it to more of a quantified reality, because then we can start, seeing how, understanding more intimately how we, operate within the system, so we can do exactly, what you said. And at the end of the day, we do have to watch out. We're in a shooting gallery. The asteroids are everywhere. And they can both be beneficial. We can hitch a ride on them, and they could provide us a lot of what we need, or they could kill us.
Yes.
Depending on how well you want to fund your space program.
Absolutely. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of the asteroids. I'm
Should be.
I'm afraid of all threats, you know. I think fear can be a good thing if it motivates you to take preventative action and be proactive to, you know, take precautions. And so what you guys are doing, you know, developing systems to leave this planet is, I think, crucial for the future. All right, I guess
Cool.
that will be the conclusion. Oh, do you guys have a website you'd like to share, or any social networking links you want the Eternal Life fans to know about?
Well, right now, our main website when it's concerned with research and development is treadlaboratories.com. And we have an informational page up there for recruiting for any young aspiring scientists or old grand wizards of their craft to come join us in our pursuit for terraforming regenerative ecosystems development.
Reach out to us, contact us, because we're always looking for more help. We're a nascent organization, but our numbers are growing, and we're especially looking for researchers, people who have a hard science background, who find this message resonates and they want to see it. They want to see it grow.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure interviewing you guys.
Thank you. Excellent, man.